Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome Eric Stenman from the Barbarians of California to the podcast. The Barbarians of California released their debut album, and Now I'm Just Gnashing My Teeth, last Friday. Eric talks about skateboarding, his journey as a guitarist and recording engineer, his desire to write music that led to the Barbarians of California, recording Training For Utopia, and more. And Now I'm Just Gnashing My Teeth is a phenomenal record that will definitely be on my list of favorite albums of 2024. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go give it a spin. Thanks so much for checking out this episode of As the Story Grows. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Thanks for listening. If you aren't subscribed already on your podcast platform of choice, I would love it if you subscribed. 2 episodes every week, and starting next week, there will be 3 episodes for some undetermined length of time, so don't miss an episode. You can find links in the show notes or over at asthestorygrows.com to our Discord server, our mailing list, or our Patreon page. Over on Patreon, I just shared a discography deep dive for Cave In. $3 a month gets you that deep dive. Enjoy today's chat with Eric from the Barbarians of California.
Some of my favorite music has come from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like getting into punk and hardcore. Most of what I heard initially was from like the California scene.
Okay.
And so you're just like, oh man, I gotta like get to California to be bands. And then it was like someone was like, listen to Fugazi, and you're just like, oh shit, this is happening right here.
Yeah.
And you're like, let's go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, I'm born and raised California. Grew up in Sacramento, so Northern California, but I've now lived in Los Angeles area for longer than I lived in Sacramento. So,
nice. Was it music that took you down?
It was, yeah. I, kind of typical story. Maybe you feel like you've done what you're going to do in a smaller city.
Yeah.
But I still have a ton of friends there and connections there, and yeah, I don't know. Still have family there, so all good.
Yeah. It's funny, like you're like same state, but like California's so big that like it did take you hours to get up there. So
yeah. That's the difference between the East Coast, right? East Coast travel, you can cover a lot of ground quickly.
Yeah, usually. What was growing up like?
Kind of like any kid. I grew up mainly suburban. Had a good family. I don't have any horror stories of the family life. I grew up, if we're going to like tie into music, I grew up wanting to love music. I loved the Beatles as a kid. We'd listen to my friend's dad had all the Beatles on vinyl, and we thought we were cool when we were 8 or 10 listening to all the Beatles records, and kind of, that's a big lesson right there, right, in music. Yeah. I remember wanting to be more of a music fan, but not quite sure knowing how. And, Tower Records was the big record store chain in California, and it started in Sacramento. So we always kind of had the hometown pride for that also. But I remember being like 12 and going to Tower Records and wanting to know what I should be looking for, not quite even knowing yet, you know. So at that time, I probably loved new wave, and I think the first music I ever bought with my own money was a Duran Duran cassette.
Nice.
So, that's I grew up as a skater kid, and so I also have a distinct memory of the day I decided I was not going to be a good skateboarder, and I was riding home from this ditch we used to go to, and I was realizing I had hit my peak, and I thought, okay, I'm going to buy a guitar. I'm going to save my money now, and I'm going to shift focus here, because I have friends who are just, blowing past me quality wise on the skateboarding front.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. Was it skateboarding that kind of got you into the punk and hardcore stuff? Or
yeah, I think I told the story before, but yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I loved music. I wanted to know more about it. And then I was obsessed with skateboarding, and I wanted to soak up all the culture that surrounded skateboarding. And a lot of that, I learned was punk or, different types of music. And Thrasher magazine, they would put out compilations or bands. Every once in a while, a band would make it on the cover. I remember Suicidal Tendencies being on the cover of a Thrasher issue. And then they would do their own skate comps. And then along with some other, they would do quick articles sometimes on bands. And so I started just really getting into all that. And I had a good friend at the time who, he was a metalhead guy. He was a couple years older than me. He loved metal. I loved skateboarding, but he thought skaters were cool, and I thought metal. I was starting to think metal was cool, so we came together and like helped each other out. Like I would show him what skateboards to buy and which shops to go to, and he would start to play records for me and whatnot. So
nice. How quickly do you transition from like, I'm a guitar player, I own this guitar, to okay, now I need to start a band?
Boy, anyone who's played guitar or tried to knows it's not fun in the beginning. Guitar, it's not something you can pick up on day 2. You're having fun and feeling good about yourself. It hurts. Your fingers hurt. It sounds horrible when you're starting. So I guess the one answer to that question would be when I learned a power chord. Once I was into punk and metal, learning how to make a power chord just changes everything, because you realize all these sounds and these bands that you love, most of their music, the vast majority of it's based around moving power chords up and down the neck. And so when I learned that little hack, that guitar hack, things, opened up. And speaking of Suicidal Tendencies, I think the first song I ever learned by myself was Subliminal by Suicidal. And, just knowing the descending power chord shape, simple as it is, once I felt like I could play that convincingly, that was a huge step forward. And I've never been a great technical player. Anytime I tried to learn to read music, it just became not fun for me. So basically self-taught and play well enough to try to accomplish the music I want to make. And I wouldn't be a great player to go and be a hired gun, join another band maybe.
Right. Yeah, I've told the story 100 times on this podcast, but like the moment I learned to play, like When I Come Around, where you're just like, oh shit, like it's just these 3 chords over and over, like it unlocks the world. You're just like, I could do this.
No, it's life affirming, right? As even a rock and roll fan, I mean, we'll be honest, like a lot of rock and roll is based around power chords, or you could fool the world a little by playing the power chord version, even if it, the original may be more. Right. Have more going on, but same thing. Green Day, so Suicidal. All these,
and then you discover Drop D, and you're just like, oh, everybody's cheating.
I mean, that was Helmet. When Helmet came out, me and all my friends, it just like changed everything. And like, wait, and you almost feel like you're cheating, but it does just create a shape and a sound of something that you can kind of like instantly go down that road. And like I said, Helmet, I couldn't believe how many amazing riffs they could write with about the same 4 or 5 power chords, different timings of that, different structures. That blew everyone away, I think.
Yeah. What was the scene like at that time in Sacramento? And at what point were you just like, okay, I need to go southward if I want to keep pursuing music?
So Sacramento, for the size of the city, I actually was there in a great time. I mean, there was a lot of activity. There were some great venues. I was fortunate enough to become friends with some of the local promoters. And I mean, it's pretty amazing looking back on the shows my various bands got to open for. I mean, I got to play with a ton of heroes. And so I would say the city was just big enough that it could attract concerts, attract touring bands, but small enough that you could have good relationships within the city. And most of the bands knew each other, even across genres and whatnot. And then, also we were an hour and a half from San Francisco and Berkeley, Oakland, all that. So I constantly was going over to the Bay Area to see shows. Like if an artist didn't come to Sacramento, usually they would come to San Francisco. And so I was lucky to be able to go over there. But so started off in bands. The reason I got into studio work was just my earliest demo sounded horrible. Most upstarts do. And I thought there must be a way I could learn this. And so I got an internship at the local studio that I wanted to record at. I was lucky enough to get an internship there, and just started off really just to be able to record my own music to try to make it sound better. After a bit of time, I got to a point where some friends would trust me to record their groups, and it just kind of grew from there. Whether it was the right decision or not, just moving to Los Angeles, that's just, that's the city where the industry is focused, and all the big studios are there. And I didn't end up even really working in too many big studios, but I do think just being in the vicinity of having more going on did help. And, it was a good decision to move, but nothing bad to say about Sacramento, though.
Yeah. I went to school for recording work, and it was like right at the cusp of like everything going digital. So like the Pro Tools, the Digi 002 had just come out, and it was like all the analog work I learned. I'd never used any of it.
I know. I thought about that because I started in the tape world and spent a good number of years before going fully digital, and even in between doing the clumsy stuff like ADATs and PA88s and whatnot, like kind of the early digital stuff, which was really horrible, just user wise sound, who's to say, but I thought about that in the schools because I actually taught for one semester. I taught an introduction to audio recording class right before I moved out of Sacramento. Actually, I taught at a community college up there, and we were still like, learning on a 1/2-inch 8-track machine, but I certainly wondered how it would be being any sort of instructor with the transition, because all the younger kids are only going to know digital. Yeah. And it's such a game changer as far as what you can, do in your own bedroom on a laptop.
Let's shift focus to the Barbarians of California. How did this band come together?
So this is so much fun for me. I we talked about when I was 16, loving metal and hardcore and thrash and whatnot. I still always been that guy. I've gone on to work with a lot of different stuff, but always had that love. And I'm probably, I can't say I'm the most in tune with all the new music that's happening right now, but what I would feel is that I just wasn't finding enough aggressive music that I was drawn to. I thought a lot of modern metal has gotten so perfected, the art of recording it. It's very impressive, but it's almost too clean and too perfect. And I wanted a little kind of rambunctiousness, in my heavy music. So I just started for fun before and after other sessions that I was working on as an engineer or producer. I started coming in early or staying late and just coming up with some instrumental music that I never was sure if it would go anywhere. I just was doing it for fun. And in the back of my mind, I thought, well, I know a bunch of people in bands, and maybe I'll get different friends to sing on different songs and just have a little self-release project, or just something that we pass around amongst friends. So it went on for years that way. And I was just kind of slowly compiling various pieces of music. Some were complete songs, some were just a riff. And, during this whole time, my day job, so to speak, was recording AWOL Nation. And so Aaron Bruno, who is AWOL Nation, and I are, we've crossed from the friend into the brother category. We're basically like brothers. He's like my younger, more handsome brother, and happens to be a great songwriter and artist in his own right. So he kind of deciphered that I was working on stuff, and he was always giving me grief to play it for him. I was always a bit resistant because I'm not a guy that likes to sit in a room and play stuff for people. I'd rather them hear it off on their own. They don't need to have a reaction for me, whatnot. But finally, he talked me into playing it for him. He said he liked it. He said, I'll get on a song, which I was always planning to try to have him on a song or two. We did one, then we did two. And then he said, this is our new band now, right? He kind of pulled the trigger on just turning it into a real thing. And so we had kind of a stockpile of music already in different pieces. He was a great person to bounce it off of and change some arrangements, add things, move things around. And then after that, after we kind of ran out of my stockpile of stuff, we just started writing together. And so he got a lot more involved kind of on the second half of what will be the first debut album, songwriting music wise, along with vocally. So yeah, right. That's maybe too long of a explanation, but that's how it started.
There's no such thing as too long in the audio only medium. What was the inspiration for the band name?
Okay, so there's a couple layers there too. Coming up with a band name is the worst part of starting a band. I had another name that I had been just, the folder on my computer that held all the music. I had another name which shall be not stated here because it turned out there was another band with this name. And we went to them. They were barely doing anything. And we said, hey, we'd love, we were going to use this name. Is there anything we can work out? And they were talking about like $15,000 they wanted for the name. And
geez.
Yeah, no, not going to happen. Barbarians of California. So Aaron and I are both born and raised California. California's been a big theme in our lives one way or another. Both sides of my family are from elsewhere. I have the Swedish side of my family came from Sweden to Chicago. And then my mom's side of the family is from Texas and or Oklahoma. And so both sets of families, separately ended up having the opportunity to move to California. And it was always a kind of a sense of pride that they had. I think, moving to California in the, say 1950s, it's kind of a golden era in the state of, just the modernity and the, leading into the Beach Boys era and whatnot. So my family always had a sense of pride about California. And I think Aaron has kind of a similar story. The Barbarian side, I mean, it's just, this is a kind of a brutal type of music. And it's kind of maybe the sentiment of not always fitting in. And as we've grown up and grown older in California, maybe that's the rebellious side, maybe the Barbarians of California is maybe that's the best way to sum it up. But it's also, you have to think of a name.
Yeah.
You hope you don't hate your band name 5 years in, so once we were done, there it is, moving on.
Yeah, that's cool. Are you just focused on the music? Or are you also involved on the lyrical side, or is that just Aaron?
No, I let him run wild there. My favorite part, whether it's this band or any other band I've been in, I've always been more so on the music side. And my favorite part of creating is, coming up with something, getting it 75% of the way through, or 50% of the way through, whatever, and then handing it off to someone and seeing what they can do on top of it or along with what you've come up with. So I let Aaron run wild, and this has been kind of a fun summer camp, I think, project for him. He's been writing music nonstop for, decades now, but this has just been the kind of let it rip, side of his personality. So yeah, I stay out and I can't wait to see what he comes up with next, lyrically and vocally.
Album's called And Now I'm Just Gnashing My Teeth. Where'd that title and inspiration come from? Was that all Aaron?
Yeah, that's Aaron. So it's a line from a song, and it's going to be the last song on the album, and it's the last line of the last song. And so, hey, we have a long band name. Now we have a long album title. It kind of summed up the fact that we made this record to blow off steam. But in the end, what does it amount to? So you could just say, I expressed all this emotion, I expressed these feelings, but I'm just gnashing my teeth. What I mean? Like, is it going to change anything? Who knows? And maybe that's okay. We're not claiming to change the world or change anyone's opinions on anything. But I think that's where that sentiment came from.
Gotcha. What was the inspiration for the album artwork?
So, it ties in, I think, like I said, with the California aesthetic. Aaron is a big surfer. So we both grew up skating, but he surfed more. I grew up only on the skateboard side of things. Our friend Ryan Clark, who's a really established graphic designer, he also plays in the band Demon Hunter, and he used to be in For Utopia. I recorded Training for Utopia 20 years ago, whatever. So I've stayed friends with him. And
did you record American Music Machine, Throwing a Wrench?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, I'll let you finish on the album artwork. Then I'm going to ask you a question about that record.
Yeah. So we were fortunate enough. Ryan actually did the artwork for the new AWOL Nation record. You know, we were making these two records kind of side by side. Aaron's even almost, said they're almost like a double album. So Ryan had just finished the AWOL artwork, and we were just huge fans of what he came up with and just the process of working with him. And so we just kind of, timidly said, hey, what if we got one more we can throw your way? And so the cover, he sketched that out in one afternoon. I have the pencil drawing of it. He drew it and said, what about something just crazy like this? And we immediately gravitated towards it. And we thought it really kind of tied into surf and skate culture in California. And to me, it looks like an ad you would have seen in a surf magazine in the 80s or 90s. So or like a t-shirt from a surf brand, maybe a skate, but I think it's even more surf. And so that's kind of the story there. We let Ryan run wild with it, and we loved his first attempt, so nice. Got lucky.
Nice. That's cool. You said your original idea for this record was to have a bunch of different people doing vocals. You have Tim from Rise Against and Daryl from Snapcase.
Yeah.
You end up working with those two.
Yeah. So, and there's a Rick from Strife. Rick Rodney from Strife is also going to be on one of the songs. So, yeah, that kind of just that initial idea, my idea when it was just my little bedroom project, kind of did spill over into the real album. So, it started with Daryl. Daryl is just both Aaron and I grew up loving Snapcase, always, just kind of seeing what they were going to do next. Aaron's old band actually played with Snapcase maybe a couple times back in the 90s, and he and Daryl stayed in touch. And anytime AWOL would tour, Daryl still lives in Buffalo. And so anytime AWOL Nation would tour in Buffalo, a lot of times Daryl would come out, or sometimes Daryl and his family. And so that was a no-brainer that once we got this going, it's just, it's this project's fun enough already, but if you could start to bring in some buddies and some heroes, why not? And so we got real lucky that, we played a few songs for Daryl. He gravitated to that one. And so we made that happen. Tim is someone that Aaron has known just from like AWOL Nation playing festivals with Rise Against and whatnot. And they've just shared a lot of like quality hang time backstage at different shows and whatnot. And Tim sang on a couple of years ago, AWOL Nation made a covers record, and Tim collaborated on a song for that. And he was awesome to work with then. And so it turned out that Rise Against was in LA making their new record, which I think is just about to come out. And we were able to just steal him away on a Sunday afternoon to come up here and work in our studio. And so that's how we got Tim. And he's such a great guy. I mean, just we had so much fun hanging out. We almost forgot that we were supposed to be together to try to record a song. We were just like going down memory lane of music stories and whatnot. So that was the story with Tim. And then Rick Rodney from Strife. Strife is from the same area where Aaron grew up, and he grew up just kind of with those guys as his local heroes. And so we've also stayed in touch with all the members of Strife. And so that was just another kind of like, hey, let's if we can make this even more fun and bring more people in, let's do it. So hope to do more of that.
Nice. Album's out October 4th. You guys have a single show on the 19th. Is the plan to try to see if you can play more shows and tour? Or is it just like you're just excited to have this project out and be able to release the music?
The plan is certainly to do more. It's kind of all, to be determined still. We'll see how we feel on October 20th when we wake up the next morning. But absolutely want to do more. And that show will definitely be the culmination of everything thus far, getting to this point. The full album will be out, and then we'll see if we can, if the proof is in the pudding for playing it live. So, yeah, I certainly hope to do more, in the new year. But, can't wait for that show.
You said you recorded Throwing a Wrench in the American Music Machine. I'm curious about the mix and vibe on that record because it has a certain like fuck you-ness to it.
Yeah. So I have to make sure that is the one I did. I'm sure it is. I did early stuff, and then they did a record elsewhere, and it's the remix kind of record, right? It sounds more electronic.
Yeah.
I'm just now that you're calling me on it, I'm just making sure I'm speaking truthfully here. Yeah. So that record, those guys were kind of, I don't want to speak for them, but I feel like they were already ready to move on, maybe from Training for Utopia. And so they kind of thought, with this record, let's just do something very different. And they God bless them, they had a lot of faith in me, and they kind of said, part of this record we'll record more traditionally as a band the way we have. The rest of it, let's record the parts, give them to you. You rebuild them into something else. So, that record was it was an interesting one in that we went in the studio, captured the band. I went home, did a bunch of stuff, worked with them kind of one by one to add on top of what we had rebuilt, and then tried to slap it all together as an album. And I actually listened to it in the last year or so, and it's pretty wild. It's pretty, whatever. Yeah, it was a science project of its own. And then shortly after, Ryan went straight into Demon Hunter, and then his brother just went heavy full-time into graphic design. And those guys both, I mean, they do amazing visual work, and real proud to have known them this long, and real psyched that they still answer the phone, So hope to work together more with them.
That's cool. It's always a record I love, but it's always so weird and obscure, even for a band that's just like chaotic noise metal, that they would just like put out this album that was very much a middle finger to everyone. I just Googled it. It does. You are credited on that.
Okay. So, I just album titles can go out the window,
Right.
Like I was quite sure that was the one. But I don't want to. Yeah, it is great. Yeah, Plastic Soul Impalement was the one I did not do. Yeah. So that's what I was worried about, that I was mixing up the titles. But they released a new song last year. Yeah. That if anyone hasn't heard, they really should. It's awesome. Like they came back and played, I think maybe Furnace Fest, and they released a song around it. It's great.